Welcome! Today we'll be going through stock taking. We will also discuss the stock take that is beneficial if you need data just for the end of financial year, and the stock takes that are good for general stock control. First, let's talk about the difference between those two things, or specifically what I mean behind stock control. Within Profit Track, each product has a stock on hand figure. This figure can be affected by things like transfers, which is stock coming in and out from internal transfers, wastage, and things like that. Goods receipting, which is another area of stock management, which is inbound deliveries from your suppliers, and stock taking, of course, impacting your stock figures as well. Doing all of these things accurately will give you accurate data on your stock movements at any point throughout the year, which is a great way to start tackling shrinkage inside your store. Today we will be more discussing stock taking from an end of financial year point, which is to get a stock take value before the end of financial year to get a dollar amount against the current stock within your store. With all of that said, let's talk about the different types of stock take inside Profit Track and which ones may be most beneficial. Starting with the one we added specifically for the purpose of end of financial year, the Valuation stock take. This stock take will take your input of value from your PDE or manual entry and give you a report with that total, but won't update the stock on hand for your product. This means that you don't need to worry about your current stock on hand value of the products, and you won't have stock on hand values on your products after you do your stock take later on in the year. The next stock take is the one we see most commonly used by stores, is the rolling stock take. The rolling stock take takes into account the date and timestamps of stock movement throughout the day. Though this does rely on you using a PDE device that's capable of doing date and time entries when scanning and has a few extra things to be cautious about, but we'll touch on that a little bit later on. The last stock take is the basic stock take. If you can have your store closed when you do the stock take count, this is perfect for you. There's nothing overly fancy about it. The number you put in the PDE or the manual entry is the number that will be on the product once you finalize the stock take, and that's all there is to that stock take type. If you are familiar with stock taking with Profit Track, you may be wondering why I didn't mention snapshot stock take and why it didn't make the list. Well, I'll explain why we don't recommend it for an end of financial year stock take. So snapshot stock takes will count the items sold between when you open that stock take and finalize it. So if you count 10 items when you open the stock take, then you count 8 items somewhere in the middle with your device, you close the stock take later on in the day, and the POS has sold 6 items, you'll get 2 at the end, because it's just going to deduct the amount that was sold. It's not going to base it off date and timestamps. So the snapshot stock take is heavily designed to get in, quickly scan a portion of the store, get out and finalize it before anything is sold. It's ideal for things behind or on the counter and promotional sections of the store. For this reason, is far more beneficial to a store running stock control rather than an end of financial year stock take. Alright, so we've talked about the 3 recommended types of stock take for end of financial year and briefly touched on how they work, so let's talk about which one is the best for you and for your store. So if you have a decent slow period and a bit of a smaller store, Valuation will probably be the best for you. If you are constantly busy and you cannot count outside of hours, Rolling will be the best fit for you. If you can close the store or if you can count outside of hours, Basic will fit perfectly because it's just whatever you count is what the stock on hand figure will be at the end. Before we get into the specifics for these stock takes, let's talk about some general tips to help you get the most accurate stock takes as possible for end of financial year with Profit Track. If you do goods received or any inventory-based functions inside Profit Track, either do them well and truly before the stock take or very much so after. Do not do any functions with inventory during the stock take. If you're counting after a day's trade, you'll need to manually collect sales in Profit Track, which you can do by going into Comms, Collect Sales. If you're doing it during your day or towards the beginning of the day, you don't need to worry about this step. So let's talk about some of the general questions and some of the frequently asked questions that we get in regards to stock taking. First one always being, if I enter a 0 unit inside a stock take, will it just count that as do not count this stock? No, if you put in a 0 unit into a stock take, it will change the stock on hand value to 0. If you do not want it to count for whatever reason, you need to press Ctrl and D on your keyboard to delete the line from the stock take. So if you have Coca-Cola at 5 units and you don't want it to affect your units for whatever reason and don't want it to be counted, press Ctrl D on that line to remove it. How do I count multiple areas of my store? Okay, so this is a common one and we see a lot of people create multiple stock takes for this. Do not create multiple stock takes for this. So this is why. If you have multiple stock takes, you got one for like the front room, one for the back room, and you count Coke in both of them. You count 5 units in the front, 10 in the back, you would think 15 in total. However, what will happen is it will take the stock on hand value of whichever stock take you finalize last. So if you count the stock room last and that had the 10 units, that's what your stock on hand figure will be, not 15. However, if you have just one stock take and you count 5 in the front, 10 in the back, it will consolidate the two numbers to create the 15 that's expected. Alright, we'll discuss the PDEs now. So earlier I mentioned, specifically with the rolling stock take, that it will go by date and timestamps. So we have a bunch of different PDEs that do integrate to ProfitTrack, and only some of them can handle date timestamps, so let's go through that. So the Denso units, they can handle this, but they need to be on software version 1.7, otherwise they won't be able to do it. PT Mate can do this, however you will need to use the data entry section on the device for date time input. If you use the stock part of the device, it won't. It will just count it as a scan and find and won't give you the date timestamps at all. Dexter, our flagship PDE, absolutely can. You'll need to use the scan and find section for date time entry. MetOrder, which is the Metcash ordering and scan and find software, is not able to do the date time searches. So if you do have a MetOrder, you'll have to use either the Valuation Stocktake or the Basic Stocktake, because it won't be able to handle the date time functions in the rolling. Throughout this video, I'm going to be referencing predominantly Dexter, because Dexter is our current flagship PDE and is the most common one going out into the market. So if you do need information on your other PDEs, there's other information on the YouTube channel for that. But if it's Dexter, the information in this video will cover that. Alright, one last thing to discuss before we get stuck into the individual stock takes a bit more in depth, which is the add items not counted. So this was put in so that you can zero items that aren't counted in a full stock take. So if you have counted your entire store, you would use this setting to remove any positive or negative stock on products that you didn't count, as they weren't in the store. You don't want your stock value to be incorrectly boosted or negatively impacted by an old stock on hand value, and that's what this function's for. So think of it this way: you had an old Xmas item, for example, somewhere in stock, and you have either a positive or negative stock on it still in the system. You go through and you count your entire store, and of course that's not there because we're not in Christmas season right now. But you've still got the negative or positive value, and you want to get rid of it. You want to get rid of it for all the products that were in that seasonal run that you don't have in the store. You add items not counted to the stock take that you've just created, and all of the items that weren't counted, in this case your Xmas items, because they're not in the store physically, will be set back to a zero stock on hand value. So we'll start getting into the specific stock takes and a bit more about them. So we'll start with the Valuation Stocktake, because that's the one that was specifically designed for end of financial year. So to do a Valuation Stocktake, you need to go into Inventory, Stocktake Management, click on New, enter your description, click on Valuation, choose your fill option, and usually this would be empty, and then you'll create it. So this will create an open blank Stocktake, at which point you can either add products manually if they can't be scanned, or if you aren't using a PDE. If you are using a PDE, you can use the option at the bottom of the screen, which is called Load PDE, and you can load New Load, and this will put in your products from the PDE. So once you're happy with that and it's all imported, or you've manually created your products, close out and run the variance and valuation reports. If you have a massive discrepancy from what's expected, you'll need to recheck the figures and edit them as needed. Once you've corrected it and you're happy with the figures, we recommend you rerun them and save these reports, just so that you have something to reference should you need it. At which point you can close out, click on the Stocktake, and click on Finalize to mark the Stocktake as done. When finalized, you can click on the Show Finalized Stocktakes option at the top of the screen and see the Stocktake we just finished. You'll notice that there isn't a tick in the Affect Stock on Hand field, because as we mentioned earlier, this is intentional. It won't update your stock on hand figures in the shop. From here, you can highlight the Stocktake and run whichever report you'd like to see the data from the Stocktake, such as values overall. The next Stocktake, which is the one that most people do commonly use, is the rolling Stocktake. So prior to starting, it is worth reminding that we recommend that no stock-based function should be done while doing this Stocktake where possible. This is things like goods receipting, transfers, and of course other Stocktakes. Where possible, please leave these for after the Stocktake is finalized, as a rule of thumb. Before starting this Stocktake, please decide whether you want to count the storeroom or the shop floor first. We do recommend counting the shop first, and that is how I'll be describing this Stocktake for this video. The stock on hand is not set by the Stocktake count. It's updated by the variance from when it was scanned to when it was finalized and what stock movements happened between those 2 points. So please keep that in mind, because the Stocktake count that you put in the device may not be the number that you see finalized in the Stocktake. So a few notes on this type of Stocktake: if you're using more than one type of PD or more than one PD, more than one person is counting, the system uses the first count time to take the sales from when using count shop first as the method. To avoid variances, do not count the shop and the storeroom at the same time. We do recommend that you consider the storeroom in quarantine and cannot be touched or looked at while doing the shop, just to avoid any sort of variances. So for the stock take to be accurate, the times on the PDE and the point of sale and the back office all need to be the same. So now that we've covered those two things, the process to create this stock take is the same as most. You go into Inventory, Stock Take Management, click on New, enter your description, click on Rolling, and then click on Count Shop first and create your stock take. This stock take, unlike the others, doesn't need to be created prior to counting the stock, because the PDEs to go by date and time, and it goes by the date of time when your collect sales was last run, which is typically at 3 AM. So you can count, then create the stock take and import when you're ready. Once you have created your stock take and input your PDE data, please run the variance report and the valuation report, same as you would during the valuation. If you have a massive discrepancy from what's expected, you'll need to recheck the figure and edit as needed. So once you've got that done and you've got it exactly as you'd like with the figures, you can go through and finalize. Now before you do, make sure that you are well and truly happy with those figures, because this is the only stock take where you are unable to unfinalize it if things have gone wrong or if you've got a count wrong somewhere in the stock take. So a double or triple check is absolutely recommended. When finalized, you can click on the Show Finalized Stock Take option and see the stock take we just finalized. From here, you can highlight the stock take and run whichever report you'd like to see the data from that stock take. The last one on the list, basic stock takes. So as mentioned earlier, this would be best if you were closed or outside of hours. The process is extremely straightforward, as the unit quantity in the PD, or what you do in manual entry, is what the stock on hand will update to. As this stock take doesn't keep track of sales or other stock take movements, you can create it with the same method as either of the other two in Inventory Stock Take Management. So to do that, you go into Inventory, Stock Take Management, New, put in your description, leave it as empty and basic, and create. This will open a blank stock take for you to fill out either manually or with a PDE. To do it with a PDE, you click on Load PDE in the bottom right, you load, click OK and accept the products. And same as the other two stock takes, at this point you want to go through and do your valuation reports and see if there's any discrepancies. If there is, you want to go back through the stock take and edit your figures until you're happy with them. Once you are, close out of the screen, click on the stock take, click Finalize to finish it up. Once finalized, you can click Show Finalized Stock Takes at the top of the screen, click on your finalized stock take, click on Reports, and run whichever reports you'd like to see the value of your stock. So as a reminder for the basic one, it does need to be outside of hours or closed, just because it doesn't account for sales in any way or any other sort of stock take movement. So that is stock takes for end of financial year purposes. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please subscribe and press the bell icon to get notifications of new videos.